After 42 days, the longest government shutdown in American history, it's finally over. Federal workers are going back. Benefits are resuming. The headlines say crisis averted. But there's something critical buried in this deal that almost nobody's talking about. And when you understand it, you'll realize this isn't the victory it appears to be. I'm going to walk you through exactly what this reopening means for your paycheck, your benefits, and your travel plans. But more importantly, I'm going to show you the hidden deadline that changes everything, a detail that could affect millions of Americans, including you, before the end of this year. If you're a federal worker, rely on government assistance, or just want to understand what's really happening in Washington, stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal in the middle of this video explains why this solution might actually make things worse. Let's start with what just happened. Let's break down exactly what occurred to end this 42-day shutdown. The Senate voted 60-40 to pass a funding bill that reopens the government. Now, here's what made this vote significant. 8 Democratic senators crossed party lines to support the Republican proposal. That's unusual in today's politics, and it only happened because the pressure had become unbearable. Think about what was at stake. Nearly 1.4 million federal workers were either sent home without pay or forced to work without receiving paychecks. Some of these people are TSA agents screening passengers at airports, park rangers maintaining our national treasures, and food inspectors keeping our meals safe. They were working, but their bank accounts showed zero income for over a month. Beyond federal workers, over 40 million Americans who depend on SNAP, that's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or what used to be called food stamps, were watching their benefits come dangerously close to running out. Many states were just days away from being unable to send out food assistance. For families already struggling with grocery prices, this created genuine fear about how they'd feed their children. So what was this fight actually about? At its core, Congress couldn't agree on spending levels for various government programs. Republicans wanted to reduce overall spending and implement what they call fiscal discipline. Democrats wanted to maintain funding for social programs and protect healthcare subsidies. Both sides dug in, and regular Americans paid the price while politicians argued. Here's the deal they finally reached. The government will reopen and operate normally. All 1.4 million federal workers will receive back pay for every day they missed. That's the good news. These workers are also protected from layoffs through the end of January, giving them at least temporary job security. SNAP benefits will continue, and funding for the program is now secured all the way through fiscal year 2026. For the 40 million Americans who rely on this assistance, that's genuine relief. But, and this is crucial, the government is only funded until January 31st. That's just 8 weeks away. This isn't a permanent solution. It's a temporary patch. Unless Congress reaches a bigger agreement in the next 2 months, we could be right back in the same situation in late January. President Trump called this reopening a great victory, saying it proves his administration's commitment to getting the country working again. Whether you find that reassuring or frustrating probably depends on whether you were one of the people who went without pay for 42 days. Now, let's talk about how this shutdown actually impacted real people, because the effects went far beyond Washington politics. Let me break this down by group so you can see where you or your family might have been affected. Federal workers. These 1.4 million Americans bore the brunt of this crisis. Imagine going to work every single day, doing your job, but not seeing a penny in your bank account for 42 days. Mortgage payments came due, rent was owed, grocery bills piled up. Some workers had to visit food banks. Yes, federal employees standing in line for donated food because they weren't being paid by the government they work for. The back pay is coming now, but that doesn't erase 42 days of stress, late fees, or damaged credit scores from missed payments. SNAP recipients. If you or someone you know uses SNAP benefits to buy groceries, this shutdown came terrifyingly close to cutting off that assistance. About 40 million Americans, that's roughly 1 in 8 people, depend on this program. Many are seniors on fixed incomes, working families where paychecks don't stretch far enough, and people with disabilities. States were preparing emergency plans for when the money ran out. Thankfully, funding is now secured through 2026, but the fact that it came this close shows how vulnerable these programs are during political fights. Air travelers. Here's where many Americans felt the impact directly. About 3,000 air traffic controllers either left their positions or called in sick during the shutdown. These are the people who keep planes from colliding in the sky. They were working without pay, under incredible stress, managing one of the world's busiest air traffic systems. Airlines had to reduce flights by up to 10% at major airports, causing thousands of delays and cancellations. Even though the government is reopening now, experts warn it could take until after Thanksgiving for flight schedules to fully stabilize. If you're flying for the holidays, expect some lingering disruptions. Social Security and Medicare recipients. Your checks kept coming. These programs have separate funding that wasn't affected. But if you needed to call Social Security for help, get a replacement Medicare card, or resolve a benefit issue, you probably experienced long wait times or couldn't reach anyone at all. Customer service lines were severely understaffed. Those backlogs are going to take weeks to clear, so if you're waiting on something, patience will still be needed. Let's talk about what this 42-day shutdown actually cost, not in political terms, but in real dollars that affect everyday Americans. First, the direct impact on workers. When 1.4 million federal employees don't receive paychecks for 6 weeks, that's billions of dollars that didn't flow into the economy. These workers couldn't pay their mortgages on time, they couldn't afford their usual grocery shopping, they cut back on everything from dining out to basic necessities. And here's what many people don't realize. Government contractors often don't receive back pay at all. If you worked as a janitor, security guard, or cafeteria worker in a federal building through a private company, you probably lost that income permanently. The ripple effect touched businesses everywhere. Think about the restaurant near a federal office building that normally serves lunch to 200 employees every day. For 42 days, those tables sat empty. Or the daycare center where federal workers send their children. When parents can't afford tuition, those small businesses suffer too. These aren't just numbers on an economist's spreadsheet. They're real people trying to keep their own businesses afloat. Economists estimate the shutdown drained billions from the overall economy in lost productivity. Government contracts were frozen. Projects stopped midstream. Private companies waiting on federal approvals or payments had to put everything on hold. Some of those businesses had to lay off their own workers or delay expansion plans. But here's something that might surprise you. Shutdowns actually cost taxpayers more money than just keeping the government running. Why? Because when agencies close and then reopen, there are startup costs. Employees have to catch up on backlogged work, often requiring overtime pay. Delayed projects become more expensive. Contracts have to be renegotiated. It's like turning your car's engine off and on repeatedly instead of just letting it run. You end up spending more on repairs. National parks saw vandalism and damage during the shutdown because there weren't enough rangers on duty. Fixing that damage costs money. Museums had to close, losing admission revenue and disappointing tourists who had planned trips months in advance. Those tourist dollars didn't just disappear. They went to other cities and states, hurting local economies that depend on visitor spending. The cost of this shutdown will be calculated for months to come. But the human cost, the federal worker who couldn't afford their child's medication, the contractor who fell behind on rent, the small business owner who had to dip into savings to survive, that cost is incalculable and immediate. Now we need to talk about something that got buried in all the shutdown news, but it's possibly the most important issue for millions of Americans: healthcare subsidies. Here's what happened. As part of the deal to reopen the government, Democrats had to make concessions. One of the biggest things they gave up was immediate action on healthcare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of this year. We're talking about assistance that currently helps 24 million Americans afford their health insurance. Let me explain what these subsidies actually are, because this affects real people's wallets. Under the Affordable Care Act, if you buy health insurance through the marketplace, not through an employer or Medicare, you might qualify for financial help based on your income. These subsidies reduce your monthly premium, sometimes by hundreds of dollars. For example, a 60-year-old couple earning $70,000 a year might pay $500 a month for health insurance with these subsidies. Without them, that same insurance could jump to $1,500 a month. That's an extra $12,000 per year out of pocket. For many people, especially those nearing retirement age but not yet on Medicare, that difference means choosing between health insurance and other basic necessities. Here's the problem. These enhanced subsidies are scheduled to expire on December 31st of this year. Republicans say they'll hold a separate vote on extending them, but there's no guarantee that vote will happen or that it will pass. And even if it does pass, we don't know if the new subsidy levels will be as generous as the current ones. Why did this get pushed aside? Because ending the shutdown became more urgent than negotiating over healthcare policy. Democrats calculated that getting federal workers paid and keeping SNAP benefits flowing was more important than fighting for these subsidies right now. They're hoping to address healthcare in a separate bill later. But later might be too late for millions of people. If you're one of the 24 million Americans relying on these subsidies, you need to pay attention to what happens in Congress over the next few weeks. If these subsidies expire without being renewed, you'll receive a notice from your insurance company in January showing your new, much higher premium. This is the hidden crisis inside the shutdown deal, one that could hit family budgets hard in just a few weeks, right after the holidays when many people are already financially stretched. If you're wondering why we keep going through these shutdown crises, you're not alone. This wasn't always normal. Let me explain what's changed and why this pattern keeps repeating. Here's how government funding is supposed to work. Congress passes a full year budget before the fiscal year begins on October 1st. They debate, negotiate, and approve spending for the entire year in one comprehensive package. That's the traditional process, and for decades, that's mostly what happened. But in recent years, that rarely occurs anymore. Instead, Congress has fallen into a pattern of passing what are called continuing resolutions, temporary funding bills that keep the government running for a few weeks or months at a time. Then they negotiate another short-term extension, then another. It's like paying your mortgage 1 week at a time instead of monthly. It creates constant uncertainty and crisis. Why has this become the norm? Because passing a full budget requires compromise, and in today's political environment, both parties have become less willing to give ground. Republicans generally want to cut spending and reduce the size of government. Democrats generally want to maintain or increase funding for social programs. When neither side budges, we get standoffs. And when standoffs drag on long enough, the government shuts down. Let's look at who Americans blame for this mess. Recent polls show that about 50% of people hold Republicans responsible for this shutdown, while 43% blame Democrats. But here's the deeper truth. This is also a structural problem with how our budget process works now. The system itself has broken down, regardless of which party controls what. The real cost of this uncertainty falls on regular people. Federal workers can't plan their finances when they don't know if their next paycheck is coming. Families relying on government assistance live with constant anxiety about whether their benefits will continue. Small businesses that work with the government can't make investment decisions when contracts might be frozen at any moment. Retirees worry about whether their Social Security services will be disrupted. It's like living on a fault line where earthquakes happen regularly. Even when the ground isn't shaking, you're always preparing for the next one. You can't build, can't plan, can't move forward confidently. And here's what concerns many experts. Each time this happens, public trust in government erodes a little more. People start to believe the system simply doesn't work. And maybe they're right to think that, because a government that can't perform its most basic function, funding itself, isn't working the way it should. Now let's talk about the practical timeline for recovery and what you can expect in the coming weeks and months. This week, Federal workers should start seeing back pay deposited into their accounts. The exact timing depends on each agency's payroll schedule, but most workers will receive their missed paychecks within 5 to 7 business days. If you're a federal employee and don't see your back pay by the end of next week, contact your agency's Human Resources Department. Next 2 to 4 weeks. Government services will gradually return to normal. Social Security offices will work through their backlogs of calls and requests. National parks will fully reopen as rangers and maintenance staff return to work. The processing of things like passport applications, veterans benefits claims, and tax refunds will resume normal speed. However, some agencies will take longer to recover than others. The Department of Education, Housing and Urban Development, and certain regulatory agencies might need several weeks to catch up on delayed work. If you're waiting on something from a federal agency, expect some continued delays but steady improvement. Through the holidays. Air travel will likely remain somewhat disrupted through Thanksgiving and possibly into December. Those 3,000 air traffic controllers who left or called in sick can't be replaced overnight. It takes months to train new controllers. Airlines are still operating with reduced schedules at major airports. If you're planning holiday travel, book early, allow extra time, and consider travel insurance in case of delays or cancellations. The critical date, January 31st. This is what you need to remember. The government is only funded until the end of January. That's just 8 weeks away. Starting in early January, Congress will need to negotiate another funding deal, or we'll be right back where we started. Watch for news about budget negotiations after the new year. The healthcare deadline, December 31st. Those health insurance subsidies we discussed expire at the end of this year. Congress needs to vote on extending them before then, or 24 million Americans will see their insurance premiums jump significantly in January. This is separate from the government funding issue, but it's equally important. What should you be watching for as warning signs of another shutdown? Pay attention to statements from congressional leaders in mid-January. If you start hearing about no progress in negotiations or fundamental disagreements, that's your signal that another crisis might be approaching. Act 8. What you can do. 400 words. Let me give you some practical steps you can take depending on how this shutdown affected you or might affect you in the future. If you're a federal worker, first, check your pay stub carefully when back pay arrives. Make sure all 42 days are accounted for, including any overtime or special pay you're entitled to. If something's missing, document it and contact your Human Resources Department immediately. Don't assume errors will be caught automatically. If you fell behind on bills during the shutdown, reach out to your creditors now. Many banks, mortgage companies, and utility providers offered special assistance during the shutdown. Some are still accepting late payments without penalties if you can show you're a federal worker who was affected. Don't wait. Make those calls this week. If you had to use credit cards or loans to get through the shutdown, look into your agency's Employee Assistance Program. Many offer free financial counseling to help you create a plan to recover financially. If you rely on government benefits, your SNAP benefits are secure through 2026, so that's good news. However, if you experienced any disruption in payments during the shutdown, contact your state's social services office to ensure everything is back on track. For Social Security or Medicare issues, be prepared for longer wait times when you call. The backlogs are real. If possible, try calling early in the morning right when offices open. You'll have better luck getting through. You can also handle many issues online at ssa.gov, which might be faster than calling. If you have marketplace health insurance, this is critical. Check your current subsidy status at healthcare.gov. Write down exactly how much financial assistance you're receiving. Then watch the news closely in December for any vote on extending these subsidies. If they expire, you'll need to prepare for significantly higher premiums starting in January. Some people might need to switch to different plans or explore other coverage options. For everyone. You have more power than you might think. Your elected representatives need to hear from you. A single phone call or email from a constituent carries more weight than you'd imagine. You can find your representative's contact information at house.gov and your senators at senate.gov. It takes 5 minutes. Tell them your story. If this shutdown affected you, they need to know. If you're worried about the next one, tell them that too. Be polite but firm. This isn't how government should work, and you expect better. Finally, stay informed through reliable sources. Check official government websites ending in .gov for accurate information, not just social media headlines. Let's bring everything together and face the uncomfortable truth about where we are right now. The government has reopened. Federal workers are getting their back pay. Essential services are resuming. On the surface, this looks like a resolution, but here's what you need to understand. This isn't a solution, it's a pause. We're funded for exactly 8 weeks. That takes us to the end of January, right after the holidays when most Americans are already financially stressed from seasonal expenses. Then Congress has to do this all over again. Find agreement, pass another funding bill, or face another shutdown. This raises a fundamental question that every American should be thinking about. Should government shutdowns even be possible? Most other developed countries don't allow this to happen. In many parliamentary systems, if the government can't pass a budget, it either continues at previous funding levels automatically, or it triggers new elections. The idea that essential government services simply stop, that workers go unpaid, that benefits get threatened, that the economy takes a hit, that's largely an American phenomenon. Some argue shutdowns are a necessary check on government power. They say it forces fiscal discipline and prevents unchecked spending. Others argue it's simply dysfunction, a sign that our political system has broken down and can no longer perform its most basic responsibility. Wherever you stand on that debate, one thing is clear. The people who pay the price for these shutdowns are rarely the politicians making the decisions. It's the TSA agent who couldn't pay rent. It's the senior citizen who couldn't get through to Social Security. It's the family wondering if their food assistance will continue. It's the small business owner who lost customers for 6 weeks. Here's my take. Regardless of your political views, uncertainty hurts regular people most. You can't plan your life when the government might shut down every few months. You can't build financial security when your paycheck might disappear without warning. That's not a sustainable way to run a country. So what can you do? Don't just watch this happen to you. Make your voice heard. Call your representatives. Vote based on who you think will actually govern, rather than just make political points. Stay informed so you're not caught off guard next time. Because unless something fundamental changes in how Washington operates, there will be a next time. All right, let me leave you with the key points you need to remember from everything we've discussed today. First, the government is reopening, and that's genuinely good news for the 1.4 million federal workers who will finally receive back pay. SNAP benefits are secured through 2026, which provides real relief for 40 million Americans. Second, this is only temporary funding until January 31st. Mark that date on your calendar. If Congress doesn't reach a bigger agreement, we could be right back in crisis mode in just 2 months. Third, 24 million Americans are about to lose health insurance subsidies at the end of this year unless Congress acts. If you buy insurance through the marketplace, pay very close attention to what happens in December. Fourth, if you're traveling for the holidays, expect some lingering flight delays and disruptions. The air traffic controller shortage won't be resolved quickly. And finally, you have more power than you think. Your voice matters. Contact your representatives and let them know this isn't acceptable. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Do you think there should be laws that completely prevent government shutdowns from happening? Or do you believe shutdowns are sometimes necessary, even with all the pain they cause? I'm genuinely curious what you think, so share your thoughts in the comments below. If this video helped you understand what's really happening beyond the political headlines, please hit that subscribe button. I'm committed to breaking down complex issues into information you can actually use. Take care of yourself, watch for those January deadlines, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll keep cutting through the noise to give you the truth. Thanks for watching.